What once was a small fishing village, Tulum has quickly become one of the top destinations in the world.
What once was a small fishing village.
What once was a small fishing village.
What once was a small
Tulum
fishing village has quickly become one of the top destinations in the world.
Was a small fishing village. Tulum has quickly become one of the top destinations in the world.
This research was carried out according to a problem we face, which is Tulum and the effect that tourism has had on its natural resources. Tulum has been in the top 5 tourist places in the world the past 7 years, and with this has come great growth in the area. Economically, it has been a great growth, both for the locals and the hotels. However, the flora and the fauna have been affected in such a way that we can't imagine, and it's getting worse and worse. This topic is interesting and important because it's a topic that should matter to all of us, environmental care. If we continue like this without taking care of it and doing more and more damage, in a few years there will be no beach in Tulum. It's a topic that is known nowadays, and therefore very studied and analyzed, since there are many people who are concerned and are looking for solutions to take care of the environment and the natural resources of Tulum and the whole world.
Our commitment to Tulum's community and local tourist area is to change the waste, contamination, and use of natural resources, and all of the tourist uses waste, and also local businesses, like to change the fact that the businesses are using all of this ecological promotion and greenwashing to improve their sales. And all of our hypotheses were accepted and reaffirmed after our research with tourists and people that have been there or actually lived there. And as they say, when your client is not happy, your business is not going good. So we need to change this.
For the research, the study sample was defined as males, females, or other genders between the ages 20 and 80 that reside in Mexico, Europe, or USA. Not only that, but also the sample was defined with a socioeconomic status of A, B, or C+, and interest of partying, traveling, and nature, among others. For this study sample, different methodologies were used, including interviews and observations, since these techniques allow deep insight into people's behaviors and mindsets, making it critical in every research project. A survey was also used, since it is an efficient way to obtain quantitative information in order to describe the preferences of a group.
Our first hypothesis is, people think that Tulum's natural resources are disappearing because of the overpopulation and excessive tourism. The theory of this hypothesis, by researching in articles, we could see that tourism in Tulum has increased a lot because of its beautiful beaches. But there are also some problems. They were not prepared for such a fast growth. As a result of the research we did in social media, we observed that people believe that because of the rapid growth and excess of tourism, Tulum is being destroyed and disappearing. In our interviews, we were able to confirm this observation. Once one of our interviewees said,
Pues que ya hay muchísimos hoteles. Me supongo que ya está superpoblado de hoteles, de restaurantes, de centros nocturnos. O sea, yo creo que ya está demasiado explotada el área.
Also, as responses in the survey we did, 73 people say they agree with our hypothesis and 57 strongly agree. So more than a half of the respondents agree with this hypothesis. We also asked people if they believe that tourism growth has affected the environment. 59 people say very much and 89 much. So more than a half believe that tourism in some way is affecting Tulum's natural resources. So as a conclusion, we can see that this hypothesis 1 is true. Since people agree that the natural resources of Tulum are running out because people are taking away the habitat of the animals, there is overpopulation and excessive tourism, and people are more concerned about doing business even if it's affecting the environment without taking care.
Our second hypothesis is, it is believed that Tulum's natural resources can be preserved by limiting the number of tourists and implementing new travel rules. The theory behind this comes from a documentary that mentioned how mass tourism can consume the natural resources of any place and is actually an ongoing problem in Mexico right now. As we observed on social media, we realized that people do believe that Tulum's tourism is rapidly growing. However, it is mainly mentioned that the government needs to be regulated and not the tourists. In our interviews, we noticed that people believe the solution that would have the greatest impact would be to impose new rules on the tourists. This can be exemplified with the audio where one of our interviewers states.
O que venga turismo y que piense que por tirar una lata, no sé, de agua o de cerveza, piense que no contamina o que...
Proving that most of our interviewers believe that it's tourism's fault and not the government. Finally, with the results of our survey, we discovered that out of 167 people, 72% agreed with this statement. Even though the social media observations showed that the main problem was the government, we were able to conclude this hypothesis is true since the interviewees and the survey agree with the statement, believing that Tulum's natural resources can be preserved by limiting the number of tourists.
Our third hypothesis was that tourists assume that Tulum's tourism is ecological and sustainable because all of the greenwashing advertisement that the businesses and restaurants and hotels use in order to improve and grow their sales. And well, the theory behind all of this of the greenwashing is they promote themselves as ecological and sustainable and responsible, but in fact they don't follow those rules. So they will have like no extra costs, but the tourist and the client is paying for that extra cost to be ecological, but they have like more utility because they are not paying for that. And well, we found out that 65% of those that were surveyed answered that they agree that all of the tourism and mercadotecnia and everything in Tulum is based on greenwashing, and they're not happy with this.
So the fourth hypothesis is that wildlife is dying or migrating to different areas due to loud musical festivals and tourists partying in the jungle at night. So in theory, animals have been dying due to changes in their schedules and are migrating to quieter and more solitary areas. Like birds, they like to sing during the day when it's quiet, but since there's a lot of noise pollution during the day, they have been forced to sing during the night. Also, many other small mammals have been changing their eating habits due to noise pollution and large interactions with humans. So noise pollution in clubs has disturbed the natural nightlife.
Hay mucha gente de todos lados del mundo que viene a visitar, entonces no solo está muy divertido ir a la playa, pero pues también está muy divertido ir a los antros, a los bares, a los clubes, lugares sociales, a conocer a gente. Mis papás siempre me decían que en Cancún cuando empezaron a ir había muchísimos changos y muchísima naturaleza y animales y así, y ahora ya no se encuentran casi nada y dicen que muchas especies han tenido que emigrar hacia otros lados, o sea, puede ser que se hayan muerto o se tuvieron que emigrar hacia otro lado.
The observations in social media carried out by my team dictate that most people in Tulum like to party at night, even when they consider themselves to be sustainable people. I can't blame them. They want to have a good time, they just don't know the effect it has on wildlife. Animal life is being affected by loud music playing at night, along with all the drugs and alcohol that is left behind. Their interview observations from our team also dictate that people agree with this hypothesis. However, they are also involved with this party behavior. The hypothesis tends to be true because 72% of those that were surveyed answered that they would agree with this statement. And as previously mentioned, we found out that even though they agree with the hypothesis, they also participate in this sort of behavior.
The solution that I propose to one of the problems faced, and which is one of our hypotheses, is that the excess of tourism is destroying the natural areas of Tulum. They are not prepared for so many people, so my solution is to limit the number of people who can enter to the town of Tulum. As each hotel limit the number of guests staying in their hotels, such as each archaeological zone limit daily entry of tourists to their areas.
My proposal for this problem is to implement fines on the tourists who litter on the beaches. This is based on our hypothesis that wildlife is being affected due to the constant partying, and therefore implementing a punishment for those who don't respect it would help improve their lifestyle and preserve natural resources of the wildlife.
So my proposal is to adopt the European Union's cleaning system, implementing specialized vehicles that would not only clean the streets, but also the beaches. I asked my European friends, how does this work? And they told me that this is actually paid by tourists. The tax that is implemented on tourists when they visit hotels or touristic attractions or any other, touristic activities, that tax goes directly to fund these trucks that clean the streets and beaches during after midnight hours, so that in the morning, everything would be clean. It's a service paid by tourists.
I propose that the community of Tulum, in together with the government of that local area, gather together and create a list of rules that they will need to follow, like the local businesses and restaurants and hotels would need to follow in order for they can promote themselves as green and ecological and responsible. And if they promote themselves like that and are not going according to the rules, they will need to pay for a fee.
With this research, we were able to conclude that mass tourism is not the only factor that is affecting Tulum's natural resources, but also the lack of government structure, the hotel's greenwashing publicity, and the constant partying on the beaches. Additionally, the hypotheses allowed us to visualize multiple different perspectives on this subject, as we found out that people believe that this problem is only due to tourism and therefore believe the main solution to this is by limiting it. We can as well see how people were victims of greenwashing publicity and didn't know up until they got there, which is why they agreed that new laws and fines should be implemented in order to prevent this. Finally, there are ways we can start solving this problem, and it is important to make others aware of it.
In this study, I learned that the whole process requires time and a lot of research to know the results you expect to find. In the process, I realized that you need a lot of patience to do things well, give time to the interviews so people can give you as much information as possible, and that is useful for my research. Also, by researching, I learned many interesting things about Tulum that I didn't know, and now with what I learned, I can do something to help to preserve Tulum.
From this study, I learned the importance of planning a research and how to implement that very same planning. Also, throughout the process, I learned that people have different perspectives and that this can be explored with different techniques such as surveys, interviews, and observations. In relation to Tulum, I was able to learn that it's not only tourism that is affecting its natural resources, but also that it's its very own government that is lacking an infrastructure strong enough to help.
So I've actually never been to Tulum. I usually visit beaches in Texas more often, so I definitely learned a lot of stuff about this place and its issues. I could say that the majority of the research conducted was completely new to me. I didn't know that loud music affected wildlife, nor did I know that the municipality's corrupt system has allowed hotels to begin construction on the natural reserves of the Tulum National Park. This research has completely opened my eyes to be more conscious. If this problem is happening in Tulum, it must be happening everywhere else tourists visit. And everyone has been a tourist at least once. It's kind of a bummer to realize that you've been damaging the ecosystem unconsciously this entire time.
Making this activity and all of this research, well, I've learned lots of things about, especially Tulum area, but going more deeply and theoretical with our project, I learned that planning your investigation instead of going just like interviewing things, like going by the day and day. If you plan it since the beginning, you will have more accurate information that will create your project in a better way and in a straight line, instead of like going in try and make it better, and but well, I learned a lot about tourists in Tulum and what is happening right now with the pollution in the area.